So coming up this weekend, we do head back to the Apex for UFC Fight Night Dolidze versus Hernandez, and of course, this is a pretty decent enough Apex card. Now, I don't think it's a good Apex card by any means, but if you do look at the prelims, I do think that there are some exciting prospects on there. I do think there are a lot of fights that could end inside the distance. So overall, it is just an Apex card, but it's also not a great Apex card as well at the same time, in my opinion. Now, what is exciting, though, is something that is coming up next Tuesday. Dana White's Contender Series is back for 2025. Of course, if you haven't seen it already, I do already have early predictions out on my channel for week number 1. I did my research for week number 2 today, so I'm going to try and sort of snowball that effect onwards and get onto Dana White's Contender Series a few weeks in advance like I did last year, because I know you guys all love to hear about it, but I do have a test in 2 weeks and a few assignments due as well. So yeah, kind of got some stuff in the university world that is coming up too. But honestly, this card, it's also, I think, a victim of the line movement inflation. That is something that I've been talking about recently. You will see there are a lot of favorites on this card that are a lot more wide than I think that they should be, a lot more wide than they would have been in the past. And I do just think that this is going to be an interesting one. Now, there are some minus 600 favorites on this card that should not be minus 600. The poster, I think this is a great poster for an Apex card. Like, genuinely, I do quite like this one. This is definitely sort of like a style of poster with the colors shifting and stuff like that. I think it looks great. And another thing, of course, is something that I haven't been plugging in a while because I keep forgetting, but Angelo at the moment is on an absolute roll, although I have been getting shot in the foot over and over and over again by these cards. Angelo has been consistently making profit over there on the We Want picks, and BetSam as well is one of the most accurate predictors in the game at the moment. So shout out to BetSam. Unfortunately for me, guys, just honestly, I haven't had the greatest year picking fights, but Dana White's Contender Series, we're going to turn it all around. I cannot wait. I'm hoping for a good one this card as well. And the first fight of the night is, of course, Gabriella Fernandez versus Julius Stoliarenko. I just think that Gabriella Fernandez should win this one. Ultimately, she does have decent enough takedown defense, but it's not great. But at the end of the day, I do think her striking is much better. I know Julius Stoliarenko does have a left-way boxing background, or, well, left-way isn't boxing, but you guys know what I mean. She does have a left-way background, but it doesn't really get showcased that much. All Stoliarenko really does have to offer is a lot of submission ability off her back. And in moments, it actually did look like a couple of years ago she was going to go on a bit of a run, which is hilarious because Molly McCann at the time did have a lot of hype. But I'm not going to waste you guys' time too much on this one. I don't think Fernandez should be minus 400, but ultimately she's a much better striker than Stoliarenko is. Her takedown defense isn't fantastic, but I think it's going to be good enough. And I think that Fernandez does win a decision in this fight. Now, Uros is taking on Gilbert Urbina. And when I saw this fight for the first time, I actually thought to myself, that can't be the guy that I thought it was. Because I saw that Gilbert Urbina had been in the UFC for 4 years. So I was like, this can't be the same guy. This must be someone else that I'm thinking of. But no, the Trayshawn Gore Ultimate Fighter season happened in 2021. Dude, that was 1 year after me graduating from high school. It has been that long since that season. I feel like time has kind of flown by. I'm on Brave browser, and I'm getting Tapology notifications. Advertisements. I'm sorry, guys. But Uros, I do think that he should win this one here. Now, of course, there are a lot of striking defense worries. His takedown defense as well isn't great. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I do think that if these guys do stand and bang, I think Uros does land first. I think that it also is going to look pretty good in a matchup, which he can be the one to close the distance. Typically, he's the one that needs to fight from range, but Urbina is going to be taller with the reach advantage. But I think that Medic, honestly, in this one here, with those inside shots, those body shots that he likes to look for, is going to find some success. I do think Medic is going to knock out Gilbert Urbina, but I don't think that this fight is going to last under 1.5 rounds. I think it's probably going to be a round 2 finish for him. Joselyne Edwards takes on Priscila Cachoeira. I did have a very good time watching DFS by the numbers, singing of the song Zombie, but I don't think that she wins. I do think Joselyne Edwards wins, and I actually am going to be picking Joselyne Edwards to finish Priscila Cachoeira. I know she got a big upset win, knockout Josiana Nunes in her last fight, but Priscila Cachoeira some of the worst striking defense the UFC has ever seen. She's come up to 135 after multiple failures to make 125. And Edwards is pretty good. You know, I think she was actually the underdog against Chelsea Chandler, and she knocked her out. Am I correct in saying that? And then obviously before that, she finished Tamiris Vidal. A couple previous losses to decent enough fighters. Her takedown defense isn't great, but ultimately I think it's better than Cachoeira's wrestling is. And I think she's going to be able to strike from range here. And I think eventually she's going to land something big enough to knock out Cachoeira. So I am actually picking Edwards by finish in this fight. Elijah Smith is going to be fighting against Toshiomi Kazama. I do think that Elijah Smith wins this fight. I actually do think that a wide line in this fight is relatively justified because Smith is a very good wrestler and he's a very good striker. Now, I actually personally think that his striking is better than his wrestling, but we did see a lot of wrestling against Vince Morales in the last fight, which I like to see because he's taking on Kazama, who is very, very one-dimensional. He only really has BJJ. I think even when he submitted Charalampus Gregorio, who was absolutely terrible at fighting, was finding success against him on the feet. He was, of course, knocked out by Garrett Armfield, which he just got outboxed brutally. And then kind of Renny Nakamura knocked him out too. Kazama's only got BJJ. He doesn't really have anything else. But Smith, he's got good wrestling. He's got much better striking. I think he's even going to have a pretty big size advantage here as well. All signs lead to a Smith knockout, and I do think that is what is being set up here in this fight. Julius Walker takes on Raffael Cerqueira. Of course, Walker stepped in on very short notice up against Alonzo Menafield and gave him a pretty good fight. Now, Walker put out a lot of volume on the feet in that matchup, and if you guys weren't familiar with Walker, you probably don't know. The way that he actually wins most of his fights is he gets a takedown, and then he just gets really brutal control, and he either finds a ground and pound KO or he gets a submission. Once Julius Walker gets a takedown, his control is very, very elite, and he has beaten good guys. You know, Niall Bartling is a guy that was on the Ultimate Fighter in the past, I think at heavyweight. Levon Lewis is a former UFC fighter. Myron Dennis, I'm not too familiar with him, but he's definitely been seen around the place before, and, you know, Julius Walker is very good. And Raffael Cerqueira, fraudulent. Just incredibly fraudulent. You look at this guy, he's a guy from Brazil, never really fought anyone of any note, especially with a demo fight as well, just not a well-known promotion, like, at all, really. I honestly do think that Julius Walker should beat him. I think that Julius Walker might even find success taking him down and ground and pounding him or submitting him. I think that Walker wins this one. Once again, though, minus 600 for a guy that's 0-1 in the UFC. A bit scary. It is scary, but I do think Cerqueira is quite fraudulent, and I think Walker does beat him. This is a fight which I was considering taking the big dog on because I just think that Christian Leroy Dancan is so untrustworthy, man. Like, that performance against Arman Petrosian, was it this one? So pathetic. Just so pathetic. Just such a sad performance to watch. He looked so bad. He made so many bad fight IQ mistakes. And ever since then, I've really lowered my opinion on CLD because coming into the UFC, dude, I thought CLD was the man. I thought he was going to be a guy that was going to break the rankings. He was going to do this. He was going to do that. And he's kind of just been a bottom of the barrel fighter for 185 pounds. He's just beaten the worst of the worst. And I do think that Pulev does belong in that list as well. And now, of course, he's taking on Eryk Anders. But the thing is, can you trust Eryk Anders? Like, I'm hearing so many different things about Eryk Anders. You know, I did actually pick him to beat Chris Weidman. I think that fight got rebooked a couple of times. I did pick Anders in that fight. Anders, he has had, I believe, some sort of substance abuse problems in the past. He's kicked that, so now he's all clean. And I think that, honestly, just in general, that's going to be a good thing for him. I thought it kind of showed when he beat Chris Weidman, but that is a geriatric old man at this point, a man that's probably approaching his 60s. So I don't really know how much you can put stock into that win for Eryk Anders, but Anders, though, does present like some sort of a stylistically difficult matchup for Christian Leroy Dancan, because CLD wants to be a very athletic, sort of, you know, like a high volume, somewhat spinny, dynamic striker at 185 pounds, and Eryk Anders, he's just going to get in your face, uses massive size for 185, he's going to clinch, he's going to dirty box, he's going to do a bit of wrestling, but you know what? Screw it. I'm picking Eryk Anders. Why not? You know, because otherwise I'm not going to pick another underdog. We're going with Anders. He's plus 425. Probably one of the biggest underdogs I've ever picked, but I just talked myself into it. we roll. We roll with Anders, right? And now we got Miles Johns taking on Jean Matsumoto. This fight, I do think, is a good stylistic matchup for Matsumoto. Matsumoto fought Rob Font on short notice. I think he won. I think, like, everyone with eyes thinks he won. Even if you have one eye, like Michael Bisping, you probably think that Gene Matsumoto won that fight, but they gave it to Rob Font. I just have no idea why. I really don't. And this fight, of course, is taking place at 135. Miles Johns fought old mate Felipe Lima at 145. But I think that I see a lot of Felipe Lima's sort of skill sets in Gene Matsumoto. Gene Matsumoto is a very, very high volume striker with pretty good striking defense as well. And we did see against Rob Font that he can get some offensive grappling going if he really needs it. And Miles Johns is such an inconsistent fighter. Like, we don't know if he's going to strike or if he's going to wrestle. We just don't know. We just don't know what he's going to do because he does something different every single time. But I do think one thing that I can rely on is Gene Matsumoto having a lot of very good high volume cardio and boxing skill set. I think that he's going to go out there against Miles Johns and win a decision, just landing a lot of boxing combinations. Andre Fili is going to be taking on Christian Leroy. Andre Fili is taking on Christian Rodriguez. I'm thinking about the Cody Brundage fight now, which I'll bring up in a moment. I do think that Christian Rodriguez wins this one. Now, historically, Christian Rodriguez has beaten all of the prospects like Bashi, like Dolgarian, like Simon, and he's lost to the Unks. I mean, Malcazar Costa ain't an Unk, but he still does have a lot of fights under his belt. But I just don't think you can just apply that sort of logic to UFC, to MMA in general, really. Like, at the end of the day, Andre Fili is a guy that does not like getting pressured. He does not like getting boxed up against the cage. He does not like a guy when he's going to aggressively clinch against you. And that is what Christian Leroy Duncan is going to try and do in this matchup. Christian Rodriguez is a very aggressive boxer that fights from the inside. He likes to clinch a bit as well, and he can offensively wrestle too. And I do think against Andre Fili, he's going to find success doing that because Fili is a pretty big guy for this weight class. He can offensively grapple, but he does like to strike from range, and he doesn't like it when you pressure him. We've seen that happen many times before. Joe Anderson Brito, probably the single best example of that. But I do think that Christian Rodriguez does beat Fili. And that does remind me, it won't be on the main card, but Cody Brundage is going to be fighting against Eryk McConico at 205 pounds on this card. And I do think that Brundage wins that matchup. I know that people will comment about that. I was actually hoping by the time I did the video that it would be on Tapology, but maybe it's not been official, but Big Marcel posted it. So yeah, I do think Brundage wins that fight, and I do think Brundage is probably going to win the fight by decision. I mean, Eryk McConico, he did look really, really bad in his short notice debut, but he's a lot better than that in my opinion. But Brundage, he does come forward quite a lot. He does wrestle offensively. His striking, as I have said in the past, I just don't think it's good. It's not improved in years. He keeps claiming that he's working on his striking. We've seen no evidence of that happening. But I do think that ultimately Brundage is going to out-wrestle McConico, who's also a wrestler. But I think that Brundage wins. Then we've got Iasmin Lucindo taking on Angela Hill. I think that Lucindo wins this matchup. I think I have seen a lot of people picking Hill in this fight because I think the logic is Lucindo lost to pressure in her fight against Amanda Lemos. But in my opinion, I just think in general that was too big of a step up in competition. I have kind of always been relatively outspoken that I don't think Lucindo is as good as a lot of people have said that she is. But I do think that she's good. I just don't think that she's good enough to be a top 5 strawweight. You know what I mean? I also think that her performance against Chinny, who's the Chinny one? The one that she lost to, but it was kind of fun. I do think that her performance against Yasmin Yaragiri is very overrated as well. She did just kind of get boxed up that entire fight, honestly. But anyways, I do digress. She should beat Angela Hill. Hill is going to be smaller than Lucindo in my opinion, and I do think that Lucindo can take her down. That is something that Lucindo was doing quite a lot before running into Amanda Lemos. She was shooting takedowns more often, and she was also getting some grappling going too. Now, her striking is very sloppy. It's just a lot of hooks. There's not really a lot of striking defense there. But against Angela Hill, a very, very old Angela Hill at this point, I do think that that skill set is still good enough to beat her. I think that Lucindo can take her down, and I think that she can land big shots if she really needs to as well. I'm going for Lucindo by decision. Now we have a short notice matchup between Steve Erceg and Ode Osbourne. This is, of course, at 135 pounds. And honestly, this is going to make things a little bit interesting because Ode Osbourne, despite being a little bit shorter than Steve here, my voice broke, of course. Anyways, Ode Osbourne, he's a big guy for 125, so actually being at 135 probably benefits him the most, even though he is taking this fight on like a week and a half's notice or whatever. Because Steve Erceg, precious Steve, he is a little bit worrying, you know, like he could just get chinned. He got chinned by Cachoeira France, and why did they do this? Again, Brandon Moreno and also Pantoja and him had a very close fight. No, I can't justify Ode Osbourne winning this fight. Steve Erceg wins this fight. Steve Erceg, before coming into the UFC, he was grappling a lot, and then he got into the UFC and he started boxing a lot. And I do think that that boxing, kind of over-reliance in the boxing, especially in maybe these two fights, did kind of lead to those losses. Steve Erceg still does have a very, very good grappling base, and I know that Ode Osbourne did just knock out Luis Garule, who I genuinely thought was going to be the guy from the Contender Series to find success. How bad was that take, huh? But I do think that Steve Erceg should be better than Ode Osbourne everywhere. Ode Osbourne is a pretty good boxer. He does have very, very fast hands for the weight class, but at the same time, we've seen him outbox before. I do think he actually beat Ronaldo Rodriguez in this fight. I do genuinely think that Ronaldo Rodriguez is like the single most talentless flyweight on the roster. But I do think that Steve Erceg should be able to box him up. I don't think I really said anything of substance in that breakdown. The point is I'm picking Erceg. I think he finishes Osbourne, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's by submission. And now we have Roman Dolidze taking on Anthony Hernandez. And this fight was a little bit of a tough one for me to predict because I know a lot of people are going to probably be trying to jump on the underdog here in Roman Dolidze. And once again, I think the odds are too wide. Why is Anthony Hernandez minus 300? Someone tell me. Because I can't justify it. I'm picking Anthony Hernandez to win this fight, but I just don't think he should be a minus 300 favorite. Is it the win over Brendan Allen? Is that how much we're rating a win over Brendan Allen in the Big 2025? Potentially. But Roman Dolidze, right? We look at his resume. A lot of wins, and a lot of wins which he's actually been getting done on the feet. However, in my opinion, what Roman Dolidze is actually best at is his grappling. Sorry, he's got like a European BJJ championship behind him, or I think it's like Nogi BJJ or something like that. Correct me in the comments, please. But he is like a well-renowned sort of like continental grappling champion in the past. He's got good grappling, but we do just see him strike a lot. And his striking, in my opinion, isn't even that good. But since it's middleweight, it just doesn't really matter. It just kind of works. Like he just spams overhand lefts over and over and over again, and everyone falls for it. It doesn't make sense to me, especially Marvin Vettori. How did you not see it coming? How did you not see the 13th overhand left coming after he threw nothing in between overhand lefts? It's amazing to me. But Hernandez might have some trouble with grappling with Dolidze. I don't think that Hernandez wins this fight by submission. I do think a lot of people are expecting this fight to end inside the distance, but I do present to you this sort of circumstance here. It took Anthony Hernandez 5 rounds to finish a death-gassed Mikael Pereira. Mikael Pereira had nothing left after maybe a minute and a half in that fight. And it took him 5 rounds to finish a gassed Mikael Pereira. It took him 3 rounds to finish a defenseless Edmund Shabazian, a guy that was coming off a layoff as well. Dolidze's good. He's tough. He's not just going to tap to anything. I think that Hernandez wins this fight by decision based on the final few rounds because Dolidze stylistic, traditionally is the word I'm looking for, doesn't have good cardio. And Hernandez's entire game plan is to spam takedowns. It is to look to grapple offensively. It is to wear down his opponent up against the cage over and over again. Actually, the Edmund Shabazian performance actually is the single best sort of display of that skill set that he does have of just constantly wrestling to really wear down his opponents. And Dolidze doesn't have good cardio. He does have a size advantage here. He does have more power on the feet, but if you're picking Dolidze, you're probably picking to win by knockout. And Hernandez isn't that lost on the feet, you know? And Dolidze, as I said, he's very one-dimensional in the striking. I think that Hernandez wins this fight, and I think that Hernandez wins this fight by decision. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Contender Series predictions will be out pretty soon.